Hi everyone, and welcome to another of my webinar series. This one we're going to go into my training gym and look at the different ways that I think about practice, that I organize my practice, some of the different drills that I use, why I use them in particular situations on particular days. Welcome to my gym and some insight into my training philosophy and my practice philosophy. Firstly, just an overview of how I think about the structure of practice, the phases of practice, if you will. We begin with the warm-up section, which we'll do every day. Obviously, this has some of the basic exercises that you would understand. It can include pepper, although we'll talk about that in a moment, and some other small games. The second phase of practice, I call the pre-6 versus 6 drills and exercises. We'll explain that also, obviously, as we go. We can then move on to some 6 versus 6 unscored work, and finally wash drills, which are the competitive part of the practice. On a day-to-day basis, I would very rarely, if ever, use all 4 of those phases. I can skip over 1 or 2 of the middle ones, whether we do the pre-6 versus 6 work every day. Not every day we do unscored work, but normally I would do 3 of the 4 every day, and all 4 obviously over the course of a training week. So we begin every practice with a warm-up, and here you can see my team going about their activities. First caveat for everything, of course, is that I work primarily with professionals, and so while some of the specifics of the warm-up are perhaps not applicable to everybody, I would urge you to look at some of the principles of what I do and how that you can put into your own practices. So to begin with, the purpose of the warm-up is the preparation for practice, which is the build-up of intensity before maximum work, before maximum jumping. And that's the bottom line of the purpose of the warm-up. Obviously, we have some prevention exercises. We can include some strength exercises, but the basic idea is that when we get to the end of this period, we can practice maximally. A lot of coaches will supervise the warm-up very diligently. I'm not a guy who likes to do that. Once the players have a good degree of education, and I'll reiterate that, once they have the education, then they can be and should be left undirected to work through their own routines, and they should be encouraged and they should be educated to know the things that are important for each player. Every player has their own preferences, but also their own physical issues, be it shoulders, knees, back, that they need to pay the most attention to. While they might not be always directed, they should nevertheless be observed, and the coach always has the option to step in and should, of course, do so. You can see in the foreground some players doing some simple serve the coach is serving, the players are receiving and setting. Coach who was observing this practice asked whether I thought it was okay for them to miss the warm-up. My counter or my response is that the warm-up is the preparation for practice, and this is a good way, provided that the intensity is moderated in the correct way, and they do get the required movements in, that this is actually a good way to prepare for practice. It primes the movements that they want to use and the reading patterns that they're going to have also during practice. I would much rather do this kind of work now than spend time at the end of practice, because this, as I said, primes the movements and reading for the main part, the 6 versus 6, which is where the learning comes into the real learning part of the work comes in. Pepper is not a drill that I like for the reasons that it really has nothing at all to do with volleyball. And on that note, I know that it's the most misunderstood and misused drill in the volleyball drill book, if you will. I once worked with a coach who was convinced that that pepper was the best exercise or the best way of improving defense, and had his teams doing it for 45 minutes at a time, which is just about the biggest waste of time that I can imagine. For the record, when I'm working with young players, I never use this drill. There is always some better way of, let's say, learning or teaching the game than this one. However, where it does have a really good benefit, especially with in this case professionals, is that it has a lot of contacts in a short period of time. And if we remember that our goal of practice is to slowly build the intensity of work until we get to the real work of 6 against 6, then this drill has some value. The players are also able to control their intensity to a degree, and one of the things that when I'm in practice, I'm watching what they do. I like to control it a little bit, but also I'm listening for the sound. And once the sound in the gym reaches some level, when they're talking to each other, when there's short time between contacts, that's when I know the players are ready to go on to the next step of practice. And more or less, I would never do this for more than 6 or 7 minutes. And to return to the point about the sound, when the sound doesn't reach that crescendo, that's when I know that the practices or the players are a little bit flat, and I can intervene in some way right at the very beginning of practice before we get to the half hour or hour mark when we've already lost, a big chunk of the available practice time. A couple of times a week, I will include some small games into the beginning, the warm-up phase of practice. If you saw in the title, I used the word stupid games, not because I think they're stupid, but because it's the way that a lot of Polish coaches typically describe these kind of things, in the sense that, of course, they have nothing particular to do with volleyball. But they are fun. They are competitive. Guys especially will get really into it. They include some bigger movements, so they're part of the physical warm-up practice or the warm-up phase. But what I really like about them is that they begin to engage the players emotionally with the practice. Because they're competing, they can have some trash talk, they can get into, they can become more emotionally involved with practice, and we know that having the players emotionally involved with practice is a big part of learning and a big part of having them enjoy the activity that they're involved with, and make them like to come to practice, is that emotional engagement. So this is one example. We'll see in a moment another example, and there are lots of ways you can do this with one player on the court, two players on the court, one ball, two ball, whole bunch of different rules. Also, and I don't have video of it right now, is I can sometimes splitting the court up into 3 metre sections or half court, for example. I can play some small court games, 2 against 2, 3 against 3. It's one of the disadvantages actually of having 14 players in a squad, is that it doesn't easily lend itself to the small court games that I really like to play. But almost every time when I get 12 players at a practice, then we'll do some 2 against 2 or 3 against 3 games. I should have actually explained the rules of the previous game. Obviously, was a rotation after every contact. The players were allowed 2 types of contact: underarm, either one hand or 2 hands, or they were allowed to spike, including with a jump. This one is a different one. There are even different versions of this game, but the version that I play is 2 serves played simultaneously, and every kind of contact is allowed, but to win a point, the teams need to win both balls. So you can have a wash in this game. This is a really fun game because it engages the guys in completely different ways. They have to think about things differently. They have to communicate things differently. Again, has nothing special to do with volleyball except some superficial level of movements, but it does engage the guys in a different way and has them emotionally ready for the more important parts of practice. I should also say that I aim for about 15 minutes for these games, not longer, and I'll adjust the scoring system as required to get about that amount of time. The next phase of practice is what I call here the pre-6 against 6 drills and exercises. These are, as the title suggests, before we get into any 6 against 6 work. I don't believe in a lot of drills for learning, for some basic movements perhaps, but not generally for learning, as learning is always better in the 6 against 6 format, where there are reading requirements and decision-making requirements and teamwork requirements. But some drills are valuable in a couple of particular cases. The first one is that the subject of the drill focuses the attention of the players on whatever your daily theme is. as much as any other reason. So obviously you'll want to perform the drills well because you need to have that benefit out of it, but it primes the attention of the guys for, or the players for the work of the whole day. The second one is that it's part of the, or can be part of the warming up process. So in this example, which I'll explain in a moment, there is some jumping, which is in a controlled manner and non-maximal, so that when they come to have six versus six on the court, then they are ready to go straight into it. I don't use this phase, this drill phase every day. Normally, it would be on a day when I didn't use the small game. So it would tend to be one or the other as a kind of intermediate warm-up phase. We have a few examples. I have 3 or 4, 5 examples here. This one is a blocking drill. The basis of it is the footwork. Firstly, the footwork of all of the blockers. So in the first few series, the blockers know where the ball is going to go. So they're practicing their footwork, which is for middle blockers. If you go to my middle blocking webinar, then you'll know that the footwork component is really important and should be practiced a lot. Then the second series, or the next set of series, if there's a description like that, is that the setter sets their own choice, and the middles have to practice reading. Middles and outside blockers have to practice reading. Obviously here we also have some repetitions for the setters. We could put in the targets there if we had them, although the too many balls bouncing off the targets can be a problem underfoot. And here are my instructions where we change from the predetermined direction to the setter's choice and reading part of the drill. And normally I would repeat the actions where the middles made an incorrect read, for example. This one is a simple form, serve reception with attack. I don't do a lot of serve and reception practice outside the 6 against 6. Certainly no drills as such, but we do this exercise in the pre-6 versus 6 area. I'll always have the coaches able to put in extra balls so that the hitters have a chance to repeat actions that they're not satisfied with, or that are errors, and also that we can add some more attacks in, so in a shorter period of time. If you watch really closely, you might notice that every serve is made after the whistle, and every time I serve in practice, it includes a whistle for developing that Pavlov's dog response that we need in volleyball. But in all seriousness, to to work on the routine that we have when we have to serve. This drill is a basic attack exercise. I never use the traditional free attack where the setter hits the ball at the spiker who then passes and attacks. I don't like that drill at all for a lot of different reasons. I like the ball for always to be coming from a reception, or mostly coming from a reception, and I really like when players can use the whole width of the net to attack and the whole size of the court to attack into. I think that's really important, and the, let's say, traditional free attack that where players are hitting from both sides of the net at the same time doesn't allow players to use the whole court. A couple of things that you'll notice that I'm standing right in the middle of the court. If you have a half decent team, the middle of the court is the safest place to stand because they never, and they certainly should never hit there. The other part of it is that it gives you, it's faster. So the next ball comes in faster because it has to travel less, and so on and so forth. And I like, for that reason, I can keep the tempo or the time between actions relatively short. The other variation, so you can see from the assistant at the other end, is to do it from a real serve, a real float serve, and this is certainly valuable for liberos and receivers to get some extra reasonably good contacts. One thing when I do this exercise is that I never do this without some control, without some target or goal. The thing that I always dislike about warm-ups or spike warm-ups is that spikers will make the first three attacks, they will just hit into the net or the antenna because of a lack of attention. So I always add a minimum attention level, which is that the ball has to go in the court without touching the top of the net, and we have a target for this. So normally it's whatever target takes about 7, 8, maybe 10 minutes. The next little bit of footage is rare piece of footage in that you'll see people spiking from, or in this case serving from boxes in my practice. It's not something that I do very often or hardly ever. In this particular case, I had a specific goal in mind, which was to practice the communication and the responsibilities of the receivers when the ball is between them, so when the serve is going into the seams. I have to say that it didn't work out particularly well today. Hitting from the box is a specific skill that you have to practice to be good at, and of course, because I don't do it very often in my practice, people aren't very good at it. So that part didn't work out certainly as well as I'd liked. The way that I've set the drill up is to include other elements, partly to have other players active, otherwise it would be 3 or 4, 5 people working and everybody standing around, which is never a good option. It certainly hasn't been since the 1980s. And secondly, because volleyball skills don't happen by themselves, they always happen in combination of other skills. So a receiver always has a setter always has a spiker always hits against a block, and voila, there we have our drill, which, even though it didn't achieve the specific purpose, or at least very well, that I had in mind, we were at least a little bit better prepared for the 6 against 6 work that followed. One thing that I very often include in this part of practice is some free serving. I like that when we play 6 against 6 that the players have had a chance to serve before we get to those actions. So this is, in a sense, the same kind of priming movement or movement activity that we talked about a little bit earlier. Again, I will always use the whistle even for this drill. The routine is important for the servers, but also it keeps the flow moving, which can sometimes happen when you do drills like this, that the attention tends to wander. The whistle does do a pretty good job of keeping players' attention on the task at hand, at least a little bit more than they would if left to their own devices, and without having to shout or exhort or any of those other verbal things that coaches love to do. In this unscored part of the practice, the 6 versus 6 unscored, there's basically only one drill form, and this is my main teaching drill. In this, we can practice all parts of block and defense, and it's the thing that I use for nearly all of my block training and all of my defensive training. First note there, you can see that action. I'm repeating a missed high ball set a point about repeating actions is these are obviously learning moments for the players, for the team, but not only learning moments in a technical or skill sense. We also use those to teach about gameplay, about teamwork, and who should play what ball and when, and what the different options are. So I can repeat actions where the wrong player goes for the ball, where the player plays the ball but chooses the wrong option, where the player doesn't go for the ball, as well as when there's a rhythm error, or a missed rhythm, or a missed technical action, a spike error, or a setting error. So there's a few different situations where I repeat actions in this teaching format. You can start this drill, you can enter the ball more or less in any way that you can think of. I like to play the ball directly to the setter, and this is mostly for reasons of timing, that I like to keep the time between the actions a little bit shorter. You can give the ball as a free ball or let a back row player spike an easy action, but those options take longer between spike, block, defensive actions. And for that reason, I like to give the ball directly to the setter, even if it's not particularly realistic. If you watch closely, you'll notice on a few occasions that the players are looking to the right of the screen, where we have the delayed video being projected onto the wall of the training gym, which is a really amazing tool that if you have the chance to do, it's really incredible tool that these days with the technology available is not actually that difficult to do. It takes a little bit of time and money, but it is doable. In this, you can practice any block and defensive situation by where the ball starts, the directions that you give to the setter, to the spikers, to the blockers. You notice that I was playing the ball a lot to position 2, which was the specific goal of this drill, was to practice the movement, the starting position of the position 4 blocker for a particular opponent that we had a few days later. I can also use this more or less as a spike warm-up or as a gameplay warm-up. And it's really effective in engaging the players, especially when they're not completely warm and the rallies can be longer, and it really engages the players' attention well at the beginning part of practice, so that the scored and competitive parts can be even better than they otherwise would be. So finally, we get to the most important part of practice, which is the wash drills. We know over the last 30 years or so that wash drills are the most important part of practice and what they are used for. Obviously, we are practicing gameplay, which is the most important part of volleyball, the decision making, the team play coordination, the use of tactics and techniques, and also importantly, conditioning. So in my case, I don't do any conditioning that's outside this format, this format of wash drills. The exception, of course, being weight training. Just because the focus is not on technique, so that we're not doing a technical exercise, that does not mean that we are ignoring technique. Technique is a part of everything that we do, and we still give feedback on that area. Different days will be focused perhaps on different elements, but just because we are using a wash form does not mean we are ignoring technique. There are many kinds of wash drills. Obviously, the number of balls that are played, who gets the ball, the winning team, the losing team, the serving team, the receiving team, how you set up your drill depends basically on your daily training goal or weekly training goal. The one that we are seeing in this is a really basic form that's my personal favorite, is the serve plus 2 free balls to the receiving team. I like this because of the intensity of it, and because there are so many easy balls, the rallies tend to be a little bit shorter. One thing that you'll notice is that the players are allowed 2 serves here. Because I don't do very much serve and reception practice outside this form, I give the players an extra chance to serve well, but also I don't want the receivers to miss a chance to receive. Normally, I will, on the first ball of a series, I let them have 2 attempts, but if they have a service series, then they only get the single attempt. How we put in the ball is, again, depending on our daily, weekly goal. This one, obviously, the ball is coming directly from the coach, and as I've talked about a couple of times already, I like this because of the speed. And I like the free ball to come from the side of the court because, again, the ball travels shorter distance, so there's less time between actions, which is also the highest conditioning component. You can also play the second or subsequent balls as high balls, as real free balls, where you give the ball to the defence who has to play straight over the net. This one can be really good because players have to think about a completely different level, and they don't just mindlessly give free balls, which is one of my pet hates. You can play defensive balls, high balls, etc., etc. One really important thing when we're talking about wash drills, and all coaches, I think, like this form. We like the intensity, we like a lot of actions in a short period of time, and perhaps sometimes we can get a little bit carried away with it. We have to remember that every extra ball that we add means that we are practicing side out less. And we're going to come to that a little bit later with a specific drill, but the main part of men's volleyball, at least, is the quality and the effectiveness of the side out, and the more extra balls we add, the less time we have to practice that. For that reason, I never use more than 2 extra balls. As a player, I used to love the more extra balls the better. The more chances I got to spike in the shortest amount of time was great. And of course, being exhausted at the end of practice was also fun. But of course, I never got a chance to practice reception, and I wasn't very good at reception. And that's what you need to be. If you have really eagle eyes, you would have noticed me signaling to the server. And what we were doing here is we have a set of bonus points that are points of emphasis that I want to have within the game. So in this case, I was calling a serving direction, and if the player was able to hit the target that was given, and in this case the target was a space, not a player, then they got an extra point regardless of the outcome of the rally. Other common bonus points that I use are recycle points. So if the spiker attacks, the ball's defended, and the team is able to score on the next attack opportunity, they get a bonus point. I like that because it really encourages the the cover, and it encourages the player to use the option of playing with the block. And another one that I commonly use is first tempo or pipe in transition, because it's the best way to score a point, and I want my teams to always be ready for that, especially the spikers and the middle blocker, who has to make the work to be an option in transition, even if it's not a free ball, even if it's a difficult situation. So there we have our basic wash form. And I like the sets to last between 12 and 15 minutes. So I feel like that's an amount of time that players can really go with maximum attention. And in reality is that during a game, there's never a period where you need to go for more than 15 minutes without any break, unless the set goes to really high score in the 40s, for example. I'm not going to show video of different kinds of wash drills. I think that most coaches are aware of different varieties, and I'm sure that there are places on the internet where you can find a whole range of different options, but this is the basic format of it. Sometimes we find ourselves in situations where the group is not perfect. We miss a couple of players, or we miss players in a particular position, and we still need to find a way to effectively practice in a wash format, in a game format. And I have to say, it's one of my pet hates when I see coaches who say they need to have the full team to be able to practice, and they'll take players from different groups who aren't the same quality just to get the requisite players in the right positions on the court. You can solve any problem, nearly any problem, with a little bit of imagination and flexibility. In this particular case, although if you don't know this team, you won't be able to see it, but basically I had only 2 receivers available for practice on this day, and I still wanted to practice my wash drills. The normal solution in this case would be to have 1 receiver on each team, and that player just stays in the front row, and we keep playing as normal. I wanted specifically on this day to practice pipe for developing our offense, so I needed to have 2 receivers on the same side. What we come up with in the end is that only one team is serving, and there's a bit of a mixture on the other team. So there's middle blockers playing front row, middle blockers defending, but I get to practice still the thing that I want the most. One thing that I don't like at all is when only one team is scoring in any particular drill. That for me negates the whole competitive purpose of using this wash form, which is that competition inspires performance, increases attention, and so on. And if only half of the players are competing, then that defeats the whole purpose of it. So we need a scoring system that allows both teams to still have a chance to win the set. And in this case, we have the same 2 free ball drill that I had in the previous wash drill, where the serving team wins a point off the first action, and the receiving team needs to win all 3 actions, and everything else in between is a wash. Again, I should make the point that this is not a perfect situation, of course, because some players, for example, will not get a chance to serve on this day, but it is a good solution to an imperfect situation where I can still get to practice a lot of the things that I want to practice. One thing that we know about players in general, teams in general, and also how we set up our drills is that the goal of the drill is what will draw the attention and the focus of the players. That's also our intention. When we make the point scoring ball in a wash drill a high ball, that is what will be the focus of the team. But as I alluded to in the previous talk about wash drills, is that the more balls that we add, the further we take the focus away from side out. And we know that side out is maybe the most important part of the game, and certainly very, very high in the deciding the outcome of a game. So how can we practice siding out? How can we make the focus on side out while still using a wash form? We know that wash forms give us a lot of other benefits that we would lose if we just practiced side out, which of course you can do by 7 out of 10 drills or 4 out of 6 or other forms of siding out drills, or drills with only one team scoring, for example, are also common. But we want to continue to use a wash form while focusing on side out. So what we come up with is a reverse wash. And the reverse wash, you can probably figure out what it is where the first action is the high ball, is the extra ball. In this case, in the drill that you can see now, the first action is the high ball, but I've also done it with the multiple free balls or short sets of free balls before the side out ball. The winner of the high ball, in this case, then gets the chance to receive, and this is the point scoring ball. The receiving team obviously has the advantage. The serving team has to make pressure to stop the other team scoring, to win points for themselves, and then we play. In this instance, we have all of the same bonus points that we had. There's the coach signaling that the serve was a bonus point, and the other bonus points for recycled balls and etc. etc. So here we have a wash form where we can still focus on side out. While we watch the guys at practice, I'll make mention of a couple of other general things about my practice philosophy, the general conduct of the daily work, so to speak. One is that what you can see is no referees. I very rarely use referees unless I can have a proper referee. I don't like to have the assistants reffing or anything like that. I prefer that the players resolve situations by themselves. So net touches, in, out, so on and so forth. If they do not resolve the situations, then I will make a decision, and sometimes it's a random decision, sometimes it's the decision for the team that's losing the set. Sometimes it's what I think that I saw, but under all of those circumstances, the best option is for the players to resolve it themselves. The second part of that is that I never stop for ball handling calls, and so in my gym you can see some pretty ugly actions at times. There are a few reasons for that. One is that I don't want the players to fixate on ball handling mistakes. I want them to make the best action without fear of being whistled, being called. But another big practical reason is that there's a big cause of discussion in practice, just like in a games. Was that a double, not a double, carry this, carry that? What I find the best solution is to never call anything. And then the players have to get used to just getting on with it. And as it happens, that's what you have to do in games too, because ball handling decisions, you argue about them a lot because most of the time they're not clear. And so we can have calls that we disagree with in the game, and we need to, as I said, get on with those actions. So there's a couple of things about general conduct of practice. I think I've gone through most of the things that I can think of for now, and I certainly hope that you have enjoyed this opportunity to come inside my gym. And as a extra note, you should know that you are welcome to my gym anytime. As I wrote about, I often have coaches visiting, and these are the discussions that we often have at the end of the practice when I sit down with them. So if you enjoyed this one, by all means, check out the webinars on demand on markleberdew.com. And in the meantime, good luck with your teams, and we'll see you again soon.